folks. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome our two guests to today's Creatives Corner. Joining us, we have Max Bernstein, Clinical Assistant Professor with the Sidney Poitier New American Film School, and the one and only Pavan Turaga, Director of School of Arts, Media, and Engineering. Both Max and Pavan are deeply embedded in emerging creative practices involving machine learning and artificially intelligence-driven art. And together, they were both awarded a gift from Adobe Research to advance their techniques and platforms for the future of mobile filmmaking, investigating machine learning techniques for video, audio, and 3D volumetric capture for mobile platforms. Folks, please press Z or press F to say welcome to our guests. All right, Pavan and Max, this is your time.
Thanks for having us, and nice to see you all. So, where do we start, Pavan? Do you have an intuition about that at this point?
No, I'm just ready to go with the flow.
Okay, so this might be a little informal. Like we're, I think what I'm interested in today is we can definitely talk about sort of the artifacts that are posted in this space, but I think that there's also like there's the outward-facing work with things like Adobe and things like Epson and things like Future of Work and things like the Air Around Us project that are maybe more visible with regard to the work we do at the intersection of arts and engineering oftentimes. But I also think that there's like a couple of humans in this room too, and the way we sort of find our way into and out of and around a lot of our projects, I think move through more philosophical spaces sometimes, more esoteric spaces sometimes. So I guess I'm kind of interested in maybe like exploring the modeling of a kind of how we work together, if that makes sense. And if anybody would rather know about like Adobe, we can talk about Adobe. But I think everybody knows a bit about what Adobe is. And that work is also still very new. And we're at the very beginning stages of planning that. Is there anything else you want to highlight as far as like outward facing before we kind of delve more inward?
No, I mean, I think in the intersection of AI and art, it's an ongoing, development in the lab. It's not something that we've done for a long time, but we are increasingly finding interesting conversations and venues for, doing that sort of work. But traditionally, much of the work in the lab is more traditionally aligned with sponsors like the NSF, the DoD, the NIH, and we are beginning to make space for these interesting creative projects at the edges, essentially. And it's been fairly exciting.
Yeah, I agree. And so can I ask you a question, Pavan? And I promised Pavan I wouldn't ask them what art is. That we have a couple of containers to pay attention to. But I do think that I'm interested, because I don't think I've ever asked you this before, which is, so I feel like you get asked what AI is a lot, and you're also in a position of like teaching people what AI is and maybe what it does or how it does. But I guess I'm curious, and you could answer this either as like Pavan the human or Pavan the professor and rockstar engineer of Twitter. Your choice. What is AI for?
So, like most big science and tech fields, there are some big voices in the field and some old dead voices in the field, which have shaped the field for many, many years and centuries, actually. So when we get asked as to what is AI, the personal answer is going to be quite different than the canonical answers.
Sure.
So for me, I don't think of AI as artificial intelligence, because I think those are two very big words. Intelligence itself, to me, undefinable. Artificial is a bit too vague. So I prefer to think of AI as something that enables me to work at scale on some well-structured problems. I think of AI as a scaling tool.
Sure.
Now, that's my traditional view of things. When it comes to the medium on which you're working, scaling can mean a ton of things. Scaling can mean, oh, process 20 terabytes of data in a snap. That's one version of scaling that people think about. But it also can mean process a picture at an extremely high resolution, like a single picture, or process one audio recording at an extremely high sampling rate. That's also scale. So for me, AI presents a way to access scale, and the outputs, when you map it to media, again, even that scaling effect presents a very interesting opportunity to do good stuff. Yeah.
So what I like about what you said is it's totally different than what I think AI is for.
Sure.
Which is not to say it's wrong. Just this is the space that we orbit together. Because I'm interested in AI for its capacity to serve personal and interpersonal relationships and experiences. I'm less interested in the scale, the big global thing, and more in trying to use it more like a mirror. Because I think with any big tool or technology that, at least for me, that I'm confronted with, I try to both see myself and I try to see myself in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when tools emerge from cultures that are maybe really opaque,
Mm-hmm.
it can often feel difficult to see yourself in it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that the origin of a lot of the provocations that I maybe lob your way come from that space.
Sure.
I don't know if that was clear to you before.
Sure. Okay, that's fine.
It's fine.
Yeah.
It's acceptable.
It's acceptable.
It's acceptable to the engineering world.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, should we show something like that?
Sure. Let's show something.
Okay. Olivia, do you have, what's your agency right now? Do you have, your finger on the button?
I mean, I have my fingers and tentacles on every button all the time. But if you guys need to share something with me, I request that you share that link with me privately, or if you'd like to share your screen from your device, if you look at the bottom left part of your screen, you'll see a little TV monitor icon, and you'll press that to share your screen. If there's any audio, you just press the system audio share as well.
I see. Okay, I think I misunderstood the mode here. So the piece that I would like to center, and we can maybe decide the best way to look at it, is the excerpt from the David Attenborough piece for a moment. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
I'm pulling up the log of work that y'all sent me earlier. Will it be in that inventory?
Totally. It might be the first one, top link.
Is it? That would be the Rush video, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, that's a good one too. Yeah.
Shall we start there?
No. Let's leave that alone.
All right. Give me just a moment, and I'm pretty sure I can pull this up. I got it. Attenbot right here. Groovy.
Thank you.
So I'm going to.
Let me just set this up for a quick second. So
perfect.
One day I said, "Hey, Pavan, what do you know about deepfakes?" And then they said, "Here's what I know about deepfakes." And then I said, "Great. Do you think we can figure out a way to create a custom deepfake? Because I have an idea, and I'm trying to see myself in AI and understand some things about how these tools work." So we made a deepfake, and then maybe we should just watch the video, and then I'll say more. Yeah.
Great. Let's all mute ourselves just to make sure that we're avoiding any echo, and I'll share my screen right now.
received my scuba certification in the summer of 2016. The video that is currently looping was taken shortly after completing my certification in the Great Barrier Reef off the eastern coast of Australia. The ocean has since become a profound teacher in my life, creating tremendous opportunities for study. On the decks of rolling boats and dozens of feet beneath the surface, I am hypnotized by the rhythm of the world. The sea is a body, and it is miraculous to feel it breathe. Humankind has certainly executed its fair share of colonizing, imperializing, assimilation, erasure, and other various kinds of barbaric and thoughtless acts. And yet, the sea, while endangered by the activities of man, has remained largely unconquered. Its spaces are vast and full of the unknown, and the parts that are known remain wild and unpredictable. Even in the future, the year of 2021, we have barely scratched the surface of what the water holds, and without the unknown, we no longer have wonder. And without wonder, we no longer have play. And without play, we no longer have discovery. And without discovery, we become the uninspired machines that capitalism so clearly wishes us to be. The ocean is vast and powerful and has no concern for the scopes or designs of humanity. It's not a space for us, and its resistance to subjugation is something to behold and perhaps something to mirror. There is no Starbucks in the ocean, although there are plenty of Starbucks remnants. Coffee cups, green plastic straws, and plenty of room for cream sweeps its way across the sea every day. Uncountable artifacts of our existence, these tendrils of the waste stream of our culture reach out in an attempted demonstration of power and influence, trying to mark the sea as a claimed space. Like a flag on the moon, Starbucks endeavors to occupy this alien landscape. But in contrast to the infancy of the caramel macchiato, the sea is ancient, untamed, and resistant, and has experienced the time before and after our beloved Anthropocene. The sea is adaptive, reactive, and shockingly direct in its communication. The sea is rising. It's redefining the boundaries of our world without care for our governments, our best laid plans, or our ingenuity. And so, in the shadow of its wake, I choose to be embraced by its wisdom and performance, and to learn what I can from its ancient and edgeless tones. I've been spoiled by my teacher, the sea. I learned how to breathe under the ocean. In this capacity, the sea has given me agency. It has enabled new understandings of my body and my capacity. Despite the terrors which often encompass the vast uncertainty of the sea, it has provided me much comfort. It's one of the few places that has made me feel so literally held by the world, suspended, aware of my own powers of buoyancy. It's a relief to be equally too big and too small, in a place where nothing really belongs, and therefore everything does. I claim the sea as a queer space, a place without a horizon. The horizon, which has been so responsible for our orientation and our navigation. and thusly our colonization, assimilation, and acculturation. To me, the sea represents both a model and a point of access into my own rematriation, my own decolonization, and my own process of becoming and belonging.
Wonderful.
As you may have guessed, that's not really David Attenborough. That's just a deep fake of David Attenborough reading some text that I wrote. And so I think for me, coming back to this idea of like AI at scale versus AI for like interpersonal individual exploration, I'm thinking about like, I'm in this case, as a filmmaker, thinking about how can I use AI as a cinematic tool to further deepen my capacity as a filmmaker. And with this film, this is just an excerpt of a 3-part thing. I'm exploring ideas around currency of celebrity, because if you hear a voice that you recognize as David Attenborough's voice, what credibility does that lend to the content all of a sudden? Does that make sense what I'm saying? And as a queer marginalized body in the world, that piece would feel completely differently if it was my voice narrating, right? So that's a currency that's really interesting to me, that I think I'm interested in mining a bit more. And in the film, like in the 3rd part, there's like a visual, really shitty visual deepfake of David Attenborough, which you'll see someday soon. Although I might redo it. I have another idea about it, but
It's actually pretty funny.
it's hilarious to me. But anyways, so that basically exposes that what the voice you're hearing is not truly David Attenborough. So I let people off the hook because ethically I think it's important. But I also think I'm interested in the capacity and currency that AI can enable when it's implemented not at scale, I guess is the short piece I'm trying to get to here. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Sorry, that was maybe a little bit of an emotional roller coaster just now. And so here's a question I have. Like, you see me flailing around over in this corner of things,
Mm-hmm.
Asking potentially childish questions about artificial intelligence tools. Are there things that these tools help you understand better about the world? And the answer could be no. I don't know.
Like independent of the questions you ask, like in my own separate practice and working with the tools.
In Pavan Turaga's life, yeah.
See, that's such an interesting question. Would I learn something about the world through an AI tool? My gut reaction is no.
Because?
Because you have to know the world before you build an AI system that operates in that world.
Okay, this interests me because, and maybe I think you have a much better perspective on the field than I certainly you do, than I do. But from my vantage point, from my limited access to artificial intelligence, what I see are, and I think this is true for many fields, people attempting to create tools that function like humans when they haven't done the work to know themselves well enough yet as their own human.
Right. So, great. So, I mean, the AI tool building world, the curricular model is this. There exists a world. We know all about it. And now we'll try to describe the rules of the world in a way that I can implement on a computer.
Yeah.
Now, in the early days of the field, there was a lot of humility way back, where people knew that the rules of the world were approximations to the true phenomena of whatever it is that they're studying. Over the years, that humility has disappeared, and we have begun to accept the rules of the world as written 50 years ago in the context of an AI system as the truth. Now, to that extent, to that little extent where a tool breaks in the real world, causing it to think, oh, the world is more complex than I thought it was, becomes a learning moment for people, for many students actually. Not for me personally, because I go in with the assumption that you cannot describe the truth, you don't know the truth is unknowable, everything is too complicated. However, we work within simplifications. I know it's going to break. So if you go in with that attitude, you don't learn about the world as much as you know it's not about representing the world. Yeah.
Do you think that my approach is a fool's errand, Pavan?
But in your case, see, the world that you are trying to investigate is not the world that the AI tool was built for. Like in the deepfake example, the world for the AI deepfake tool is the world of speech and sound. That's not what you're investigating in your film.
Yeah.
So
Correct.
it's interesting. Yeah.
Well, so then that begs the question, why isn't this the world that AI is built for? Or why can't it be? So we're going to talk to you people now. So here's the thing. One of the things that I've raised to Pavan, whether you don't have to consent to talk about this if you don't want to, but is this idea of what, like, just sort of the provocation of what a queering of AI could look like or means. And I think for me, that's a process of like it's this rematriation thing again of returning to the fundamental of what it is, which is just a tool, which I think is maybe where we are aligned in our treatment and relationship to it. But Pavan has said really interesting things to me about the queering of mathematics that I don't think you will hear today, but I think they're lovely. You can talk about straight lines if you want, but I feel like we're hitting up against where you want a Q&A to happen, Olivia, format-wise. Is that true?
Use this time for your benefit. So this discussion has been really interesting to me. I see that the chat is active, so let's just keep going with this. But feel free to ask us questions directly, and we can answer.
I do think let's bring the community in, because like we just do this for like
this will not end. Right.
This will not end. Like this is our text conversation that you're looking into here. I would love to hear people's thoughts, or if there is something else you saw in the room that you're like, I need you to explain yourselves. We can do that.
We've got some chatter from Kaushik, who says that they think that they disagree with Pavan, with AI not being able to help them understand the world. Kaushik, do you want to unmute, or do you want to stake your claim in the chat? Your choice.
Right. My question is, my disagreement is on the Pavan's point of AI not being able to help. An aspect of world that I'm very much interested is in experiencing things that I did not get an opportunity to experience firsthand myself. I do not know the troubles of an underprivileged community, any underprivileged community, for example. Right. I think AI, and that constitutes a very important world for me, where and the definition of my world is also some of its parts, correct? It's not world as a whole, but there are different parts, and it's one part. But I think AI can actually help me better understand what a disadvantaged person is going through, right? Maybe if they build a AI experience that I can go and immerse myself into.
Right.
Why is there?
Right. So exactly. I mean, that's the sort of clarification I had to make about what I meant by world. So if you take, the world as it is versus the development of an AI tool that to process a specific type of media also assumes a world model. So I was talking about that world model. So do I understand anything more about how light interacts with surfaces because I played with an AI model? Do I understand more about how human speech production works because I played with a deepfake AI model? So my answer is I don't know any better. I probably know what I need to know before I started working with these models. But if you take the tool and put it in service of these kinds of questions, which has nothing to do with the data and the phenomena that the AI model was built for, then it becomes interesting. Yeah.
But it's not. It's a different currency.
Yes.
And that's maybe culturally where the linchpin is, I think, because problems at scale are fundable.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And nobody cares about my feelings. Yeah. Yeah.
So telling the stories of communities, underprivileged communities via an AI tool set will certainly teach us about the world inhabited by those communities. Absolutely, sure. Yeah. Yeah. Finessing the meaning of world.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah.
So I care about your feelings, Max.
Thank you, Kaushik. I care about your feelings too.
Thank you. You can remove the spotlight on me. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Other thoughts or provocations from the room?
Thank you so much. I have a thought and provocation. I am not experienced in AI-driven art or machine learning to the extent that either one of you are. But in making this room last night, I was playing around with AI art creative tools for the very first time. And I think what I am struck by is the sort of borderlessness that AI art produces. And I almost wonder, I'm totally with you, Pavan, about this notion of you have to know the world before you can build a system to reflect it. We see this a lot in VFX, and a lot of the work that they're doing in those sorts of simulations are really about simulating natural physics that occur in the real world. But I'm thinking about this borderless aesthetic, the way that things blur and merge into each other, that there seem to be very few hard lines. And this is really exhibited in a lot of the work that y'all made together, and that is posted in this room. And so it starts to make me think of if we can move through the world with that sort of filter in our minds, informing us about how edges, silos maybe don't exist or could exist in a different state. That's just something that I'm thinking about as I think about, as an artist, as a maker, as a human, how AI-driven art is changing or informing my perspectives as I move through the world. And I'm curious what y'all think, but I'm also curious if anybody else who's dabbled in a little bit of AI-driven art has a similar experience.
I definitely have some thoughts about that, but did you have anything?
Yeah, I'm just curious. Have people seen any of our blending one thing into another thing art?
Yeah, it's all around the room.
Can I just say, okay, so Olivia, as I've been navigating this world, I've also sort of I feel like I'm relearning some things in the process of enabling these tools. And one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot lately is this idea of legibility versus believability. And I think that my sort of deep film production, storytelling training has privileged believability as a really important currency. And the way that I draw a distinction between these two things is the following. So when you think about believability, I think of the sheer amount of people that are involved in a Marvel movie in order to make you believe that every detail, graphic, special effects, character is real, right? That is an immense lift and labor, and honestly, environmentally kind of shady, so much processing power necessary for the 8K 3-hour Marvel film. You know what I mean? And then when I was playing with AI for, similar to what you just described, I was thinking about oh, this is not believable, but this is super legible. This is really interesting. And so then I started thinking about what does it mean to only use the amount of brush strokes you need to make the tree legible? And is there value in that as an approach and a currency to storytelling or world building? Must we always lean into believability? Can legibility be enough? And I think certainly there's an aesthetic question here, but also this larger environmental question of if every time you take a picture with your smartphone, you're using the highest quality, and then that gets stored on the cloud, and that's what everybody in the world is doing all the time. And we're not even really like metabolizing any of this content most of the time. But like, why is high resolution always privileged? And is that connected to this believability thing, or this, and is legibility enough for the memory? Is legibility enough to convey the idea or for the world that you're building? Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
Yes, absolutely. I was just writing in the comment that to me, AI almost feels like a more accurate representation of a memory that I have in my mind, as opposed to the instance that I experience in the way that photography might. Um, yeah, I wanted to key in Michael, who is studying a little bit of Houdini himself, and is really immersed in the VFX world. And I'm really glad that he jumped into this chat saying that his brain immediately goes to the debate between VFX and practical effects. And
Sure.
Michael, if you want to elaborate on that, you can use the chat or unmute yourself, whatever you like.
I think it's interesting to me from a personal standpoint. I find that practical effects, while they can sometimes seem less detailed or like more rubbery or more physically based, they still seem more real to me because they're like physically being captured on camera. And I think even though the VFX is able to get to very high detail, textures, modeling quality, there's still little things that our human brains can pick up on that just are enough to make us not believe as much. So I think what's really interesting to me is the melding between VFX and practical effects in new movies like Dune, for example. I think it's interesting to see those two worlds coming together and synthesizing their topics, their ideas, and bringing those worlds together to create even more believability.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, I mean, I teach in the film school, if that wasn't already clear, and I think that like I'm in this funny place of trying to guide people and figuring out how to make films, which definitely include VFX, which definitely include practical effects, and then like there's like the ethics behind these choices. And I see somebody wrote like, yes, this is an age-old question of realism versus expressionism, and that's true. But in a way, I think the stakes are different now because of the way that these tools work. It's does that make sense? What I'm saying? And maybe it's like doesn't matter, but we got to cut our water 21% in Arizona, and I'm just wondering where we can cut some corners here. And if it is central that your idea is believable, then let it be central. But I just think maybe we should all have to ask that question first of ourselves or of the team or of the project.
I have a question for you two artists. And as I'm sitting here just absorbing the poetics of this discussion, as I'm thinking about the blendliness of AI-driven art, how do you as makers synthesize all of this passion and these impulses and these curiosities? How do you synthesize this into something like an application to an amazing grant opportunity to Adobe Research? Is that difficult for you? What do you lose and what are you gaining in that process?
I mean, I come from a place of looking for the edges all the time, and I don't know how you feel or what your impetus is, but I think that I'm interested in really understanding the range of a tool in order to know how to best put it to use. And in a way, I think a lot of the dreaming around, like, for instance, this Adobe application was thinking about places either in practice or in industry that seem a little obvious, but that there is no infrastructure. And so I think the question that I say, hey, Pavan, what do you think about some infrastructure about this? And then Pavan does this magical thing where they just write a brilliant proposal and say, what do you think about this? And then I say, this looks brilliant. How about these 5 new things? And then they say, I've submitted it. And that's how that works,
Great. That's great. And I guess this segues pretty nicely into the question that I really have, because I've obviously worked with y'all and met you both individually. Pavan, when you emerged on this artistic creative journey, I was like, that's so cool. I did not know that was a facet in the diamond of your personality. And Max, I've always known you to be a technologist in a way, but not necessarily situated in this engineering world that Pavan inhabits. And so what has it been like collaborating across these different disciplines? And what are you gaining? What have you learned? What have you lost, happily or otherwise?
Oh my God, that's a big one. So it's interesting. Of course, I've been at the School of Arts, Media Engineering since 2011. So I have been collaborating with artists for a while. But the types of collaborations that I was exposed to in the beginning were problem-solving types of collaborations. That an engineer or a technologist has tools that an artist could use, and the engineer is the tech support, which was fine. That's how I began collaborating with artists. But for 10 years, I was in that mode, and it was I saw some repeating patterns in that way of collaborating, which is, oh, new shiny tool, do you know how to work it? Or new shiny tool, who knows how to work it? So it became a bit mundane after a while. It's like, okay, I know the drill. With Max, it's slightly different. Max doesn't come to me for tech support. I end up doing some tech support, but Max never presents a tech support question to me. It's always an investigation into, a very poetically framed question. Like, I'd like to. I mean, it's not about what Max wants from me as much as what Max wants to do on their own. And if I think I can help Max get there faster, I just dive in and say, all right, I got it. You don't have to waste 6 months of your time. I can do this for you in a week. So it's a slightly different way of collaboration. I've always enjoyed working with artists, but the collaboration with Max has been more, it's been more inspiring because it doesn't come with a request with a time limit or a deadline. So it's more free-flowing. And the requirements are not set in stone either. So I have a lot of my own little agency in the tools that I'm familiar with to use them in any which way I'd like. So it's been pretty amazing. What I've learned is this, having gone through these iterations, the first kind of collaboration, which is tech support, is a transactional thing. I would do it if, there was some way I could find, a student worker and get them paid, stuff like that. The work with Max is not that way. It's just stuff that I do when I have time. So I've been finding that the ownership of an artifact that you produce, when you've invested your own time because you were inspired by an idea, has a very different flavor versus the ownership that you would feel for an artifact you produce because someone paid you to produce it. And I'm beginning to understand those things a little better. In the former case, if it's a contract, you pay someone to produce something, I'm happy with the money in the bank and I'm done. But with something else like this, I'm beginning to get those, the possessiveness that you hear from artists all the time, and which to me for many years felt petty, but I'm feeling the same things. I still haven't processed it enough to know what it means.
If you tell us to come back, if you would like this next year, I will share with you the results of our unpacking of pettiness. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like we're dropped into a long-standing conversation between y'all.
Well, there's this Wonder Spaces thing that we're talking about, and we did entertain the idea of writing the proposal in front of you today, but we didn't do that. So, you know, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Thanks for listening to our peculiar provocations here.
I'm curious to hear your end of the question, Max. It was a question posed to you both. So what have you learned and discovered?
I mean, I think like it's really right now in my life. It's hard to parse. I'm acting in a space that is really intentional. Let me say it that way. And so I could say that I find joy in dreaming up problems that are a bit frustrating for engineers, but in a way that they can't let go of them. Which maybe that sounds kind of condescending, and I don't mean it that way. But I think that yep, I'm stumbling through this for sure. That's happening live across.
What is liveness and performativity?
Yeah. So I think that I think I'm increasingly more and more agnostic about a lot of things. Maybe that's a better way to go with this. And what I mean by that is, yeah, my training is in filmmaking, and my life is as a musician, and my professional life is as a performer, technician, designer, musician, person. And then now I'm in this professor space. But honestly, I'm just trying to understand things. And I'm trying to help other people understand things by proxy of my understanding of things. And so I think that like engineering to me represents a space of possibility, because it's relatively a much more resourced environment to certain extents, depending on, again, what kinds of resources you're thinking about. But I think that the level of question and problem solving and things that I'm trying to understand about the world maybe intersect with things at scale, but then thinking about the things at scale and making them scalable. Does that make sense? So that there's a metaphor there that can be utilized not for like Nike or for Facebook, but for people just walking around trying to figure out how to make it through the day. That was really circuitous and messy. I don't know if that it might not have been believable, but maybe it was legible. You know?
Listen, I was just going to follow up with that. We're talking about the edges blending here and there, so I think circuitous is right on brand for this conversation. I'm monitoring the chat, and I want to make space for anybody that wants to answer their or ask their own questions, but I also want to drop in some final questions that we usually share with our artists, and there's a few of them here, but Pavan and Max, I encourage you to pick your favorite one and answer that one. So I'm going to drop it in the chat. And anybody else, there's several questions in there, but anyone else, if you have something for our artists, please unmute yourself or just use the chat and I'll spotlight you. So the questions that I've asked here are, who's championed your creativity in the professional sphere? How do you pay that forward? And otherwise, could you tell us about a time of uncertainty in your creative career? And then how did this uncertainty resolve or not? Tell us about a time when you were victorious or felt victorious. And I think the most important question of the day is, what are you curious about right now?
Maybe you should take a stab at it.
I can stab this one.
Yeah.
So I'll say Michelle Ellsworth has been one of my constant and most generous champions in the world. She's a gosh darn brilliant artist, maker, thinker, doer, beer, educator person up at CU Boulder. The problem is that most of her work is not on the internet, which isn't really a problem, especially if you experience it in the world as it's meant to be experienced. But I would say the vast majority of her impact is not legible in these kinds of virtual spaces. But she is somebody that I highly recommend knowing some things about and trying to catch. We just got we were doing something at MPAC right before the pandemic, and then everything went away, and we're going to be back at MPAC next summer. So there will be some opportunities in the future to see what she's up to. And I should say her and I have been collaborating for over a decade. And then uncertainty is something that's been on my mind pretty consistently for a while. And I think that where I'm at is that I'm actually moving towards uncertainty. Instead of trying to rid myself of it, I'm trying to find agency within it. Because I think that the uncertainty actually is a constant and has been for a long time. But it really helps when you can figure out how to turn your free fall into inertia rather than feeling powerless the whole time. And I think that, in a way that's a TED Talk for a different day. But I really think that it's possible to take the uncertainty and use it.
Valid. Pavan, any other thoughts to that? You are an artist, after all.
No, I don't think I can claim to have experienced what an artist experiences in terms of uncertainty, because I think I've had a no, I don't think I'll pretend to be in that space. What do you think, Max?
I think we have a conversation to have, is what I think. Yeah, no, go ahead.
I mean, the only thing I'd say is, to the extent that my experiments with my body and my look constitute personal art, yes, I've been through this very uncertain phase of the impact or negative or positive or whatnot on my life, really. And who was my champion then? I don't think I had a champion as much as, like I had people who were non-judgmental, who left me alone to figure things out. I think that's plenty rather than championship in a way. And how did the uncertainty resolve? I don't think it has resolved as much as I feel liberated. It's like, I kind of connect with this notion that you just said, which is you can embrace the uncertainty because it is liberating. There is something to be said about the only safe space in the world is a prison, right? That's a very common trope. So that's where I am with all these experimentation, which is safety is a prison.
And then, yeah, if you expect safety everywhere, what does that mean?
But then I'm finding that the world is very accommodating. See, this is where I find, the AI experiments with blending across the edges. When you try to manifest it in the real world, you find that the world is actually accommodating.
Yeah, but you're also going to be a black belt next month. So, you're a black belt, and I'm the sun. So come at us, whatever. Like.
Okay, one final question, just because I've been reviewing my notes, and I think that this is such an important topic. In watching the At and Bot video, we talked about that we go to the sea where there is no horizon. And that makes me think of, and I think in the video it was alluded to, that the sea and the ocean is a queer space. And it makes me think, are queer spaces inherently round per se? But as a more pointed question, you talked about the queering of AI, and I'm curious, how are you queering your industries? What tactics are you using? How are you taking up queer space in those realms?
I think it's all about participation, honestly. Participation and decentering are maybe the words I would use for how I'm attempting to do those things. And I think taking up the space you need to take up is helpful. I think, dealing with whatever shame one has is really, really liberating and helpful in order to get to those things that you're asking about.
Pavan, any thoughts?
Uh, so I had a long conversation with Max on trying to. So I'm a very definitions person. When someone says, if a word has common meaning, got it. But something like querying AI, or querying a field, or querying a conversation, I had to ask Max to define it. What do you mean? And Max gave me this definition, which is about participation, decentering, and decolonizing, and looking at alternative ways of engaging. When you do it that way, yes, there is a lot of. I mean, I think in my professional space, in the AI world, we do that all the time. We are almost always talking of alternative ways of doing things, and things that are not popular, things that may not align with big tech's ways of thinking of AI modeling. To that extent, yes. But if it becomes a question of, am I somehow creating a conversation around queer representation in the space of AI? No, not that explicit. But it's more around me being me in the spaces. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to add one more thing to that pile, which is insisting that you do belong there.
Right.
I think that's the other piece of that, because I think that AI can feel like a total obelisk or a total opaque, whatever metaphor you want, inaccessible thing. But I think you can still insist on participating, or that you have currency to offer that space, and not everyone will agree or everyone will take you up on it, but some will. And that's really, that's just finding your people, like in any kind of community, right?
Absolutely. Oh, Toby disagrees. You being you in that space is furthering the conversation and changing the narrative. Toby, you want to elaborate on that a little bit? If you do, let me know and I'll spotlight you. Okay, just a second. Spotlight.
I think that's from my perspective, that sense of identity and being present in these spaces and being bold and unabashed, I guess, with your identity of self and your own queer representation, absolutely is a function of advocacy and changing the narrative in your field. So I just kind of putting an underscore on what Max had said, that like you being there, like you do have space to be there, and you do claim your place, and that's, I think that has a lot of value. And if nothing else, that you can be a representative for other people who are exploring the field and can see you as a leader in that regard.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right, folks, with that, it is 4:12. Oh, Kaushik, come in again. When Pavan does it, it also gives a number of students from a culture that views this as taboo. They get inspired too. Kaushik, shall I spotlight you again, or do you have more to add? No, they're like, no, please. All right, beautiful. Thank you so much, Jesus, for chiming in as well. Folks, that is what our program for today is. 4:13. Yes, Caroline, thank you to our speakers. For those of you who have the map pulled up and you can see everybody, do what we do, press Z or press F to showcase your gratitude to these two amazing speakers for their time, for their expertise, for their willingness to share in these very, very experimental realms. Yeah. To sort of close out today's programming, I'm of course going to put some tunes back in the space, throw up a banner. I encourage everybody to go and take a deep dive and explore some of the art that is curated around the space. All of it has been created in collaboration with Pavan and Max themselves. So check it out. We'll have the artists in the space for just a few more minutes. So if you'd like to say hi or have a one-on-one conversation, come join them. I want to say thank you so much for joining us for this Creatives Corner with Max Bernstein and Pavan Turaga. This video will be up on our YouTube probably on Monday, but thank you guys so much, and we wish you a fabulous weekend.